Most people believe that global power comes from vast land, deep oil reserves, or towering industries. But what if I told you a country with none of those things, no massive military, no endless farmland, no piles of gold, managed to outsmart some of the world's biggest giants, using nothing but its people? This is the story of the Philippines, a nation often underestimated, struggling with poverty and political turmoil, yet quietly building an invisible empire powered by its citizens. In this video, you will discover how Filipino workers silently drive entire industries across the globe, why remittances have become one of the country's strongest economic weapons, and the surprising cultural traits that gave the Philippines an edge even against superpowers. But here's the twist. While giants fight with armies and industries, the Philippines found a different battlefield, one where people themselves became the ultimate strategy. And by the end, you'll see how this tiny nation pulled off something the world still doesn't fully understand. So when you look at the Philippines on a map, it doesn't immediately scream global power. It's a scattered archipelago of more than 7,600 islands sitting in the middle of typhoons, earthquakes, and volcanic baths. Unlike Saudi Arabia, it has no oceans of oil beneath its soil. Unlike China, it doesn't have endless factories stretching across its land. And unlike the United States, it doesn't command the world's strongest military or financial system. For much of history, this geography was both a blessing and a curse. The islands were beautiful, rich in biodiversity, but hard to unify. Mountains, seas, and distance made it difficult to build large-scale infrastructure or industries. Even in modern times, transporting goods from one island to another could take days, making it far more expensive compared to countries with one large connected landmass. Add to this a long colonial history. For more than 300 years, the Philippines was under Spanish rule, followed by decades under American control, and then Japanese occupation during World War II. Each foreign power extracted what it could, but left behind an economy that struggled to stand on its own. By the time the Philippines gained independence in 1946, it had to rebuild not just its cities, but also its sense of direction. The post-war decades weren't easy. While neighbors like South Korea and Singapore began their rapid rise, the Philippines lagged behind. Corruption and political instability drained resources, natural disasters destroyed homes, roads, and livelihoods almost every year. And the archipelago's geography, instead of being an advantage like Japan's or Singapore's, became a logistical nightmare. So when outsiders looked at the Philippines, they saw a nation with very little leverage. No sprawling manufacturing hubs, no highways connecting thousands of miles of land. On paper, it seemed destined to remain a small player in a world dominated by giants. But here's the thing, where other countries depended on what lay beneath their soil or on the machines inside their factories, the Philippines discovered something different. Its greatest resource wasn't hidden underground, it was walking on the streets, living in homes, filling classrooms. It's people. And while it might sound obvious every country has people, the Filipinos turned this into something extraordinary. They didn't just survive despite their circumstances, they turned themselves into the very product that the world needed. Nurses, teachers, engineers, seafarers, call center agents, Filipinos would soon become the invisible backbone of global industries. This wasn't by accident. It was a response to the nation's limitations. When natural resources couldn't pay the bills, when factories couldn't compete with China, and when politics kept holding back local growth, the Philippines leaned on its only reliable strength, its people. And as we'll see, this decision changed not only the country's economy, but also the lives of millions around the globe. Because while giants built their power on land and money, the Philippines quietly learned how to outsmart them with something far more powerful: human capital. Imagine this, a nurse in London finishing a night shift, a seafarer guarding a massive cargo ship across the Pacific, and a call center agent in Manila answering customer complaints from New York. All three are Filipinos. And while they may be thousands of miles apart, together they tell one story. The Philippines' greatest export isn't sugar, coconuts, or electronics, it's people. Today, more than 10 million Filipinos live and work outside their home country. That's nearly 1 in every 10 citizens. They're everywhere: doctors in the Middle East, engineers in Singapore, caregivers in Canada, domestic workers in Hong Kong, and seafarers on ships that move a quarter of the world's goods. In fact, there are so many Filipino seafarers that if they all stopped working, international trade would come to a standstill. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. These workers don't just leave an impact abroad, they send their strength back home in the form of remittances. Every year, Filipino workers abroad send billions of dollars to their families in the Philippines. In 2023, this figure reached around $37 billion. To put that into perspective, that's more money than the entire GDP of countries like Jordan or Paraguay. These remittances have become the lifeline of the Philippine economy. They pay for food on the table, tuition fees for children, houses being built in provinces, and small businesses starting from scratch. During times of crisis, whether it's financial crashes, political turmoil, or natural disasters, these remittances act like an economic shock absorber. While factories may shut down and governments may falter, money keeps flowing in from Filipinos abroad. This is what makes the Philippines different. Instead of depending on oil like Saudi Arabia or factories like China, the country built an invisible economic engine powered by its citizens working across the globe. And the beauty of this system is that it's remarkably stable. People will always need nurses, teachers, ship workers, and service employees, no matter how advanced technology becomes. But this isn't just about numbers. There's something deeply human about the Filipino workforce. Overseas Filipino workers, or OFWs as they're called, make enormous sacrifices. They spend years away from their families, missing birthdays, weddings, and sometimes even funerals. Children grow up with one or both parents working abroad, and entire towns rely on relatives sending money back home. It's a painful reality, but it's also a powerful display of resilience. Because while many countries measure their wealth in terms of gold or oil, the Philippines measures it in terms of the love and sacrifice of its people. Every dollar sent home isn't just money, it's a parent's embrace from thousands of miles away. And together, those billions of dollars give the Philippines a weapon that even superpowers struggle to match: a global network of human capital quietly fueling both its economy and its survival. But remittances are only part of the story. The Philippines didn't just rely on its workers abroad, it built a homegrown industry that shocked the world, one that allowed it to go head-to-head with a global giant. If you have ever called customer service and heard a calm, friendly voice on the other end, there's a good chance you were speaking to someone in the Philippines. What many don't realize is that this small nation quietly built a global powerhouse industry, one that even managed to outshine India, the world's longtime leader in outsourcing. This industry is called the BPO sector, Business Process Outsourcing. It includes call centers, IT support, financial services, even medical transcription. And here's the shocker. By the mid-2010s, the Philippines overtook India as the call center capital of the world. Think about that. A country with far fewer resources, far less infrastructure, managed to beat a giant with over 1 billion people and decades of outsourcing experience. How did the Philippines pull this off? The secret lies not in technology, but in culture. First, English fluency. The Philippines has one of the highest English proficiency rates in Asia. Unlike many countries where English feels forced, Filipinos speak it naturally, with a neutral accent that makes communication smooth for Western clients. For American companies especially, this was gold. Second, cultural adaptability. The Philippines has spent centuries under Spanish, American, and Japanese influence, shaping a society that can blend seamlessly with different cultures. In fact, Filipinos are often described as cultural chameleons. They can adapt their communication style, humor, and empathy to match whoever they are speaking to. And in customer service, this ability is priceless. Third, and maybe most importantly, warmth and empathy. Filipinos are known for their hospitality, the kind you feel when a stranger treats you like family. That same trait shines in the BPO industry. Customers don't just get their problems solved, they feel heard, understood, and cared for. And in a world where service often feels cold and robotic, that human touch makes all the difference. The result? An industry employing over 1.5 million Filipinos today and generating billions of dollars every year. These jobs don't just support workers in Manila's skyscraper offices, they ripple outward, feeding families, paying school fees, and fueling small businesses in towns across the archipelago. And here's where the Philippines truly outsmarted the giants. Instead of competing in heavy manufacturing like China or high-tech hubs like South Korea, it chose a battlefield where size and natural resources didn't matter. What mattered was people, their skills, adaptability, and human connection. It's like David facing Goliath, but instead of picking up a sword, David simply used his voice. And that voice built an industry that giants like India, with all its numbers, couldn't keep up with. This wasn't just a clever move, it was a declaration. The Philippines showed the world that when you can't win with land, oil, or armies, you can still win with people. But this human-centered strategy didn't stop at call centers. It extended far beyond, shaping industries across the world from hospitals in the West to ships crossing oceans, and it turned ordinary Filipinos into the country's ultimate weapon on the global stage. When most nations think about power, they think of armies, skyscrapers, or billion-dollar industries. But the Philippines chose a different path. Instead of building power out of steel and concrete, it built power out of people. And in doing so, it turned its citizens into what can only be described as a human superweapon. This wasn't a grand government strategy written in policy papers, it was born out of a necessity. The Philippines had limited resources, political instability, and constant natural disasters. Competing with China's manufacturing or Saudi Arabia's oil was impossible, so the country leaned on its greatest strength, its human capital. Take the seafarers, for example. Nearly 1 in every 4 sailors on the planet is Filipino. They crew the massive container ships that carry almost 90% of global trade. Think about that. Without Filipinos, the world's supply chains, everything from your smartphone to your morning coffee, would collapse in days. Or look at the nurses and caregivers. In the United States, the United Kingdom, and across the Middle East, hospitals are filled with Filipino healthcare workers. They don't just provide medical care, they provide comfort, empathy, and warmth. Entire healthcare systems would struggle without them. Even in entertainment and culture, Filipinos have carved out a presence. From Broadway singers to pop stars, their talent spreads far beyond their borders. Soft power like this doesn't just bring pride, it shapes how the world sees the Philippines. What makes this strategy so unique is its resilience. Factories can shut down, oil prices can crash, wars can destroy infrastructure, but people, their skills, their adaptability, their resilience can't be taken away so easily. The Philippines realized this earlier than most, and instead of fighting on a battlefield it couldn't win, it chose to dominate in a space where giants had no advantage. It's a bit like chess. While bigger nations focus on pawns, rooks, and knights, symbols of military or economic might, the Philippines quietly positioned its most powerful piece, its people, and slowly it began to checkmate challenges far larger than itself. But this strategy comes with hidden layers of influence too. Filipinos abroad don't just send money, they build bridges. They create cultural exchanges, shape foreign perceptions, and tie the Philippines into global networks in ways that few other countries can. It's soft power at its purest, earned not through propaganda or military bases, but through care, service, and human connection. This is why calling the Filipino people a superweapon isn't an exaggeration. They became the tool that allowed a small resource-limited nation to punch far above its weight. And in many ways, this was the Philippines' smartest move, outsmarting giants not with size, but with humanity. Yet, every strategy comes at a cost. Behind the resilience, behind the billions of dollars, there is also sacrifice. Families separated for years, children growing up without parents at home, a country deeply reliant on its diaspora, sometimes at the expense of building strength within its own borders. And that's where the hidden cost of this human superweapon begins to show. Every strategy has two sides, and while turning people into the Philippines' greatest weapon has brought resilience and global influence, it has also come with a price measured not just in economics but in human emotion. Walk through any small town in the Philippines and you'll hear a common story. A mother working as a domestic helper in Hong Kong, a father sailing across oceans as a seafarer, an older sibling in Dubai sending money home every month. On the surface, it sounds like success. Families able to build new homes, send their children to good schools, and escape poverty. But look closer and you see the cracks. children growing up without their parents by their side, marriages strained by years of separation, birthdays, graduations, and even funerals missed because a family member was working thousands of miles away. These are sacrifices no statistic can fully capture. For many Filipinos, the dream of a better future is built on the heartbreak of living apart. Then there is the issue of brain drain. Many of the Philippines' brightest minds, its doctors, engineers, scientists, leave to work abroad where salaries are higher and opportunities are greater. While their remittances fuel the economy, their absence leaves gaps at home. Hospitals in rural provinces face shortages of doctors. Local industries lose talented workers. The very people who could help fix domestic problems are often helping other countries instead. Economically, dependence on remittances is also a double-edged sword. Yes, the billions of dollars sent home each year stabilize the Philippine economy, but they also create reliance. If global demand for overseas workers falls, or if countries tighten immigration rules, the Philippines could suddenly find its strongest lifeline at risk. It's a fragile balance, one that makes the economy vulnerable to shifts far beyond its control. Even the celebrated BPO industry has its challenges. While it provides millions of jobs, most are concentrated in cities like Manila and Cebu, leaving rural areas behind. The work, often night shifts to match Western time zones, can take a toll on health and family life. And as artificial intelligence threatens to replace routine call center roles, the future of this sector is uncertain. But perhaps the biggest hidden cost is psychological. For decades, Filipinos have been told that the best way to succeed is to leave the country. Go abroad became a mantra. It created a culture where opportunity is often seen as something found elsewhere, not at home. This mindset, while understandable, makes it harder for the Philippines to fully develop its own industries and keep its talent within its borders. Yet, despite all these challenges, there is something remarkable about the Filipino spirit. Instead of breaking under the weight of sacrifice, families endure. Instead of collapsing from dependence, the economy adapts. And instead of losing its identity, the Philippines has built a global community. Millions of citizens scattered around the world, yet tied together by one flag. It's this paradox, the success built on sacrifice, the strength shaped by struggle, that makes the Philippines' story so complex and so extraordinary. But the story isn't over. Because while giants measure power in wealth and armies, the Philippines has shown something different. That people themselves can be the ultimate resource. And that brings us to the final chapter, what this strategy means not just for the Philippines, but for the world. When we think of nations that outsmart giants, we often imagine military victories, technological breakthroughs, or massive economic revolutions. But the Philippines rewrote the playbook. It proved that power doesn't always come from armies or skyscrapers, but from something far more human. It's people. Look at the story as a whole, an archipelago with limited land and resources, a history scarred by colonization, disasters, and political turmoil, a nation that on paper shouldn't have been able to compete with its neighbors, and yet it did. Not by outbuilding China, not by outspending the United States, not by outproducing India, but by outlasting them in resilience, empathy, and adaptability. The Filipino workforce became the invisible engine of global industries. Nurses powering hospitals, seafarers moving world trade, call center agents quietly beating India at its own game, and caregivers shaping families across continents. Their remittances became shock absorbers for the economy, cushioning it during crisis. Their cultural adaptability turned them into bridges between East and West. Their warmth, often overlooked, became a competitive advantage in industries where machines could never replace human connection. This wasn't luck. It was strategy, born not from abundance, but from limitation. Where others saw weakness, the Philippines turned it into strength. Where giants flexed their muscles, the Philippines flexed its humanity. Of course, this story isn't without pain. Families separated for years, talent drained from local industries, and economy leaning heavily on workers abroad. But even in these sacrifices lies a unique kind of strength, the ability to endure hardship and still find pride in what has been achieved. And that's the shocking truth. While giants depend on power that can fade, oil that runs dry, industries that can be replaced, empires that can collapse, the Philippines built its strength on something far more lasting. Its people. So maybe we have been asking the wrong question all along. Maybe greatness isn't about the size of a country, but about the size of its people's spirit. Because if a nation without vast land, without great armies, without powering industries can rise to global relevance with nothing but its people, then perhaps the Philippines has outsmarted the giants in the smartest way possible. And in a world that's racing toward technology, automation, and artificial intelligence, maybe the Philippines has quietly reminded us of a truth we have all forgotten: that the greatest power doesn't come from machines, but from human beings themselves. Thanks for watching, mate, and thanks for hitting the subscribe button.